Welcome to the Week 1 FCS podcast recap show, episode 1 of Week 1 of the FCS, and brought to you by our sponsor, this number 2 pencil here on my desk. It's not number 1, but it's number 2 because sometimes you just need a solid number 2 to get you through the day. You get tired of number 1 and you want a nice, solid, you might not agree, but it has a point. So let's start going through the FCS here. We'll start alphabetically with the Ivy League. They don't have a lot of teams. They actually have the lowest amount of teams that anyone can have in the FCS. And you think someone would have absorbed their conference by now, like the Big Sky, but here we are. A lot of their teams faced stiff competition. The winners were Dartmouth and Columbia and Princeton and Brown. So 4 of the Ivy League won: Dartmouth, Princeton, and Brown. And that would be 3. No, Dartmouth, Columbia, Princeton, and Brown. Yeah, 4 of them won, 4 of them lost. Notably, Penn lost to Montana after finishing second in the FCS last year. So moving on alphabetically, we'll go to the Delta Intercollegiate Conference. They have a lot of teams, a lot more than the Ivy League, so we'll go quick here. Arkansas Blind Bluff won, UT Martin lost, Tennessee State lost, Illinois State won, but that's not a Dick team. Austin Peay was the team that lost, and they were in the Dick. Missouri State lost, Southern Illinois won, Tennessee Tech lost, Morehead State won, Alcorn State won, Southeast Missouri won. Murray State are they a Dick team? Yeah, they must be. They won. Central Arkansas, they won. Mississippi Valley State, they won. Southeast Louisiana lost. Jackson State won. And EKU won, which it was a close game, scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter. Next, going to Mid-Atlantic in the alphabet. Here, we're going to talk about Wagner dropping 84 points through 3 quarters and then being held scoreless in the fourth, so kind of disappointing for them in their win against Missouri State. And then Norfolk State scored 29 points against Presbyterian. And Tarleton State, which is a team that I didn't realize was in the FCS, beat Marist by 3 points, 39-36. Another notable game was Georgetown scoring 40 points. And then also Colgate scored 8 points against San Diego, who scored 7. And they played 1 entire quarter. Eastern Washington is not part of the Mid-Atlantic, and they scored 57 on St. Francis STFU. So a couple teams I left out there you can look for yourself online. Another conference that exists is the MVC. They had a couple games. One of them went into overtime. Illinois State won in overtime against Austin Peay. We've talked about that already. Valparaiso won by 1 point, despite being outscored in the fourth quarter by 1 point. Western Illinois won by 2 points despite being outscored in the fourth quarter by 1 point. And Sacred Heart defeated the reigning conference champion by a lot. Indiana State also scored 60 points or more. And then you had Eastern Illinois beating a CFC team. Those are the highlights from around the MVC. Here is the Southland Conference. We have going real quickly here because we have a lot of ground to cover. We've got so many teams in the FCS, 128, I think, or 26 or 28. So then we have Grambling State. I think they're a Southland team. They beat Lehigh 46-27. Merrimack only played 2 quarters against Southern, but won 23-10. We had Drake upending Abilene Christian 19-14. Arkansas Pine Bluff outscored NSULA 28-0, and they only played 2 quarters. SFA and Monmouth had a very close game. SFA winning 31-30. Sac State was a team that played a game this year, and Rhode Island and SHSU. Rhode Island scored 13 in the fourth quarter to win 36-33 after holding SHSU scoreless in that same quarter, which is pretty impressive. The Colonial is a conference. The William and Mary scored 30 points against Bryant, who seems to have returned to their rightful place as a team that's not good. Towson, which is a team in the Colonial, scored 32 more points than their opponent did. And Duquesne, it says Duque, 35-18 over Stetson in a surprising game. Chattanooga defeated Villanova, which is the Colonial team here, Villanova. Gardner-Webb is not a Colonial team. Montana State is not a Colonial team. All of those teams won. Delaware, the Blue Hens, scored 20 points in the fourth quarter. And then we had Delaware State outscoring Southeastern Louisiana 28-26 to win the 63-46. Those scores were in the fourth quarter, those first two scores, and then the last score was the final score of the game. Let's go to the CFC, which is the conference that has all of the Carolina teams in it except for one. The number of teams from the CFC that won this week is so far that I'm seeing 2, 3, 4. Looks like 4 teams won. One of the teams that lost was Western Carolina, which had a great year last year, but Dixie State scored 58 points, and Western Carolina only scored 26. We also had Georgetown scoring 40 points on SC State. I think we talked about that game earlier in the broadcast. Brown is an Ivy League team. Remember, they're the conference with not a lot of schools. They defeated NCAAT. Samford is an ASUN team, and they defeated Elon 24-17. The only other notable game I'm seeing is NC Central lost their coach last year at the end of the season, and they only scored 14 points and gave up 42, including 21 in the first quarter. So it was really over from the get-go there. Let's move to the America East. We've got a couple teams in the America East, most notably Sacred Heart, which we've talked about already, and William and Mary, which we've talked about already, and Merrimack, which we've talked about already. Harvard, which is an Ivy League team. We talked about them at the beginning of the broadcast, that conference with only 8 teams. New Hampshire beat them by 10 points. Lafayette scored 28 points in 5 periods to defeat Albany, who only scored 27 points. Let's see, Maine lost their coach and their first game, and Dayton scored against Stony Brook and actually defeated the Seawolves 27-21. And Jacksonville State, we will talk about them. They defeated Holy Cross 45-13, so we'll hear about them later in the show. The Big Sky is the next conference on the docket. We've talked about a lot of these games already. The number of Big Sky teams that won this week is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? I don't actually know. I'm just looking here. Eastern Washington scored 57 points on St. Francis. Dixie State scored 58 points on Western Carolina. Montana State scored 24 points in the first of their showdowns with Morgan State. Southern Utah gave up 42 points to Towson. And then Princeton defeated Cal Poly, and Idaho State lost in overtime as well. Montana, once again, defeating Penn 35-15, as mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. And Dartmouth, I think we haven't mentioned them yet. They beat Northern Arizona, scoring 22 points in the second quarter alone. So last conference that exists is the Atlantic Sun Conference. A bit of an oddity this week as they played a game that was out of conference, but 2 teams from the same conference competed as Jacksonville defeated ETSU 43-13. Games that I haven't mentioned yet, Idaho State and Jacksonville State. I know we haven't talked about them yet so far, but both of those teams ended up winning. Jacksonville State scoring 24 points in the first, none in the second, none in the third, and 21 in the fourth to win 45-13. And Idaho State, Kennesaw State followed a similar pattern, scoring 7 points in the first, none in the second, none in the third, and 7 in the fourth to tie the game to go to overtime. So kind of curious to see if those will be the 2 teams in the conference championship, as they had very similar week 1 games, both scoring a lot in the first quarter and none in the second, third, and then scoring again in the fourth. The last game I'd like to talk about is North Alabama scoring 14 points in the first and second quarters, and then never actually being afraid of SDSU coming back on them. Butler is a team that exists. They scored 7, 9, 8, 7, which makes you think that it was like 4 different baseball games. They defeated Campbell 22-31. So that brings us back to just all of the conferences, and you can go to 1212.1. This is a website that exists, and it is also our sponsor of the podcast. So thank you for listening to Week 1, Episode 1 of the FCS Recap. It is brought to you by the number 2 pencil on my desk and 1212.1, sponsored by Jocks, or promoted by,